The fluorescent lights of the restricted research facility flickered with an ominous rhythm, casting long shadows across Dr. Jack Thompson's weary face. Outside the reinforced windows, the artificial cityscape of New Houston stretched beneath a dome of regulated atmosphere, a constant reminder of humanity's constrained existence. Thompson's fingers traced the holographic display, each movement revealing complex quantum equations that defied everything the consortium believed possible. 30 years of galactic subjugation had transformed Earth into a carefully managed preserve. The consortium's regulations were absolute. No faster-than-light travel, no advanced weapons research, no independent technological development beyond approved parameters. Humanity existed as a monitored species, their potential ruthlessly contained by alien overseers who viewed them with a mixture of condescension and mild scientific curiosity. Thompson knew the stakes intimately. His parents had been researchers, silenced after attempting to challenge consortium technological restrictions. Their careers had been systematically dismantled, their research confiscated, their reputations destroyed. He had watched as brilliant minds were crushed beneath the weight of alien bureaucracy, their dreams of exploration reduced to carefully managed scientific theater. The current holographic model before him represented years of clandestine research. While official consortium science declared certain quantum interactions impossible, Thompson had discovered something extraordinary. The fundamental assumptions about space-time manipulation were fundamentally flawed. A series of minute quantum resonance patterns suggested a pathway to hyperspace navigation that existed between the established theoretical frameworks. His research team was small but exceptional. Rebecca Martinez, a computational physicist with an intuitive understanding of complex systems. Michael Wong, an engineer whose ability to construct microscopic quantum circuits bordered on the miraculous. And Daniel Rodriguez, a theoretical mathematician who could translate abstract mathematical concepts into practical applications. They had been working in secret, utilizing a network of independent research stations scattered across Earth's remaining technological enclaves. Each station believed it was working on a fragment of a broader research initiative, none fully understanding the complete scope of Thompson's vision. The current model suggested something revolutionary. A method of quantum entanglement that could potentially circumvent traditional faster-than-light travel restrictions. Instead of moving through space, the proposed drive would essentially fold space around a vessel, creating a localized quantum tunnel that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. Thompson understood the risk. If successful, this research would fundamentally challenge the consortium's monopoly on interstellar travel. The alien overseers maintained their control through technological superiority, carefully rationing scientific knowledge to prevent any species from challenging their hegemony. A soft chime interrupted his concentration. An encrypted message from Martinez scrolled across his display, her typical cryptic shorthand revealing both excitement and caution. Quantum resonance stabilization at 87.3%. Probability matrix suggests potential breakthrough. Recommend immediate phase transition testing. He allowed himself a rare smile. They were close, impossibly, maddeningly close to something that could change everything. The facility's security systems were a marvel of integrated technology, a testament to human engineering working within consortium-approved parameters. Multiple layers of quantum encryption, biometric verification systems, and AI-driven monitoring created a seemingly impenetrable barrier. But Thompson and his team had spent years understanding and subtly manipulating these systems. What the consortium never understood about humanity was their capacity for adaptive thinking. While alien species followed millennia-old research protocols with religious devotion, humans saw rules as suggestions, obstacles as challenges to be overcome. Outside, the regulated cityscape continued its carefully managed existence. Millions of humans went about their lives, unaware that a small group of researchers was about to challenge everything they understood about their place in the universe. Thompson returned to his equations, each calculation a quiet act of rebellion. The quantum model pulsed with potential, mathematical symbols dancing across the holographic display like a coded revolution waiting to be unleashed. Something extraordinary was coming. and the consortium had no idea. The experimental research station hung in low Earth orbit, a sleek assemblage of modular laboratories and interconnected research modules. From the outside, it appeared unremarkable, just another of the countless scientific installations that dotted humanity's limited cosmic territory. But inside, Dr. Jack Thompson and his team were about to change everything. Rebecca Martinez's hands moved with surgical precision across the quantum control interface. Her dark eyes flickered between multiple holographic displays, tracking quantum entanglement metrics that would have seemed like pure fantasy to consortium scientists. Michael Wong stood at the secondary systems console, his fingers hovering over emergency shutdown protocols, a precaution born of years of working on the bleeding edge of scientific possibility. "Quantum resonance stabilizing," Martines announced, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Quantum tunnel matrix at 92.6% coherence, initiating final pre-jump calibrations." Thompson watched the data streams, years of research condensing into this singular moment. The quantum drive was unlike anything in human or alien technological history. Instead of traditional propulsion methods, it created a localized quantum field that could theoretically fold spacetime around a vessel, creating a transit method that wasn't so much movement as it was a complex dimensional shift. The station's communication systems were deliberately isolated. No direct transmission to Earth, no potential for consortium interception. If something went wrong, they would simply disappear, another unexplained anomaly in humanity's limited cosmic record. Consortium monitoring stations had been running constant surveillance, their advanced sensor networks prodding Earth's technological development with a mixture of condescension and mild scientific curiosity. They believed humanity was contained, their technological growth carefully managed and restricted. They were wrong. "Initiating quantum jump sequence," Wong called out. His fingers danced across the control interface, triggering a series of cascading quantum interactions that defied conventional physical understanding. The first sign that something extraordinary was happening came as a subtle distortion in the station's internal quantum field. Holographic displays flickered. Gravity seemed to momentarily twist, objects suspended in midair as if uncertain about their relationship to physical space. Then everything changed. A brilliant flash of quantum energy erupted from the experimental drive. For a millisecond that stretched into eternity, the entire research station existed simultaneously in multiple quantum states. Sensors overloaded. Computer systems crashed and reconfigured themselves. The very fabric of space-time seemed to hiccup. When the quantum field stabilized, Dr. Thompson realized something impossible had occurred. Their initial calculations suggested a microscopic quantum jump, perhaps a few thousand kilometers at most. Instead, preliminary sensor readings indicated they had traveled nearly 3 light-years from their original position. An entire research station, transported across a distance that should have been completely impossible. "Status report," Thompson demanded, his voice remarkably steady. Martinez's hands were already moving, running diagnostic sequences. All systems functional. Quantum drive integrity at 98.3%. We've actually done it, Jack. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. This was a fundamental reconstruction of humanity's understanding of space travel. Consortium monitoring stations would detect the anomaly within hours. Their response would be swift and decisive. Diplomatic vessels would be dispatched. Economic sanctions would be prepared. The full weight of their technological superiority would come down on humanity. But Thompson and his team had prepared for this moment. The quantum communication network they had developed would make traditional interdiction techniques obsolete. Information would spread faster than any centralized authority could contain it. "Begin data transmission protocols," Thompson instructed. "Initiate distributed backup sequence." Across multiple hidden research stations on Earth, identical quantum drive blueprints would be activated. Encrypted data packets would begin propagating through a network designed to be impossible to shut down completely. The consortium believed they could control humanity's technological growth. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Outside the station's reinforced windows, stars shifted in unfamiliar patterns, a visual testament to their impossible journey. Humanity had just taken its first step toward true cosmic freedom. The global network of human researchers transformed into a digital phantom army within hours of the quantum jump. Consortium surveillance systems, designed to monitor and suppress human technological development, suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by an unprecedented information storm. In a nondescript Tokyo research lab, Hiroko Nakamura began replicating Dr. Thompson's quantum drive blueprints with meticulous precision. Her fingers flew across holographic interfaces, breaking down the complex design into modular components that could be distributed across multiple hidden networks. Each segment was encrypted, disguised, transformed into a technological puzzle that could only be assembled by those who truly understood its potential. Simultaneously, in the sprawling technological corridors of Sao Paulo, Carlos Rodriguez was doing something entirely different. A systems engineer with a reputation for technological creativity, he was developing a distributed communication network that could operate beneath the consortium's monitoring systems. Traditional communication channels could be shut down, intercepted, controlled. But Rodriguez was creating something more organic, more fluid, a communication method that mimicked the adaptive neural networks of the human brain. The consortium's first response was predictably bureaucratic. Diplomatic vessels were dispatched to Earth, carrying official communiques demanding immediate cessation of all quantum research. Economic sanctions were prepared. Technological access would be restricted. Communication channels would be monitored with unprecedented intensity. They had no idea how completely they would fail. Dr. Jack Thompson had prepared for this moment. The quantum jump was more than a technological breakthrough. It was the first move in a carefully orchestrated global resistance. Each member of his research network understood their role precisely. They weren't just scientists. They were technological revolutionaries. In Lagos, a team of young programmers began developing quantum encryption protocols that would make traditional decryption methods obsolete. Their leader, Adebayo Okonkwo, understood something fundamental about human innovation that the consortium consistently underestimated. Humans didn't just solve problems. They reimagined entire systems of problem-solving. The consortium's technological control relied on a hierarchical model of scientific development. Research was carefully managed, technological breakthroughs meticulously controlled. Each species was allowed to develop only within strictly defined parameters. Humanity had been given the smallest possible sandbox, and they were about to demonstrate how meaningless those boundaries truly were. Within 72 hours of the quantum jump, Thompson's research had spread across multiple continents, not as a single unified project, but as a distributed network of independent research initiatives. Each team believed they were working on a fragment of a larger puzzle, none understanding the complete scope of the technological revolution they were creating. Consortium monitoring systems began to detect anomalies, quantum resonance patterns that shouldn't exist, communication channels that defied traditional routing protocols, technological innovations that emerged simultaneously across multiple research centers. Rebecca Martinez managed the global information flow with surgical precision. Using a communication network she had personally designed, she coordinated research teams across different continents. Text messages, encrypted data packets, and quantum communication bursts moved with a fluidity that made traditional monitoring techniques look prehistoric. The economic sanctions arrived exactly as predicted. Consortium vessels moved to restrict human technological access. Research funding was cut. International technological cooperation agreements were suspended. To the aliens, it would look like a decisive move to control a potentially dangerous technological development. They didn't understand that they were feeding the revolution. Each restriction became a challenge. Each limitation became an opportunity for human researchers to demonstrate their most profound evolutionary advantage: adaptive creativity. Where alien species saw rules as immutable laws, humans saw them as suggestions to be cleverly circumvented. Michael Wong, working from a small research station in the Rocky Mountains, began developing quantum computational models that could operate using minimal technological infrastructure. If traditional communication channels were shut down, they would create new ones. If computational resources were restricted, they would develop more efficient systems. By the end of the first week, Dr. Thompson knew they had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections. The consortium thought they were implementing control. In reality, they were helping to birth a technological revolution that would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity was no longer playing by the rules. They were rewriting them entirely. The first consortium reconnaissance ship arrived 2 weeks after the quantum jump, a sleek obsidian vessel that represented millennia of technological refinement. Its sensor arrays were considered the most advanced in known space, capable of detecting the most minute technological anomalies from thousands of light years away. Dr. Jack Thompson watched the incoming vessel through a series of scrambled satellite feeds, a wry smile playing across his lips. The ship represented everything the consortium believed about technological superiority, a perfect hierarchical system of innovation that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Michael Wong had been working nonstop, transforming the initial quantum drive concept into something far beyond its original design. What had begun as a method of space-time manipulation was evolving into a comprehensive technological platform that defied every known principle of physics. The key, Wong explained to Thompson during a secure communication burst, is not just in the quantum manipulation, it's in the adaptive response matrix. Their breakthrough went beyond simple technological innovation. They had discovered a method of technological evolution that mimicked biological adaptation. Each time the consortium's sensors probed their research network, the technological systems would subtly reconfigure themselves. Weaknesses were immediately identified and restructured. Communication channels became fluid, dynamic entities that could reshape themselves faster than any monitoring system could track. Rebecca Martinez managed the global research network like a digital general. Her communication protocols turned the entire human research effort into a living, breathing technological organism. Traditional scientific research was linear, hierarchical. What they were creating was something entirely different, a distributed intelligence that could think, adapt, and evolve in real time. The consortium reconnaissance ship began its systematic scanning of Earth's orbital space. Its sensor arrays were designed to detect the slightest technological anomaly, to pierce through any attempts at concealment. Sophisticated quantum interference detection systems swept across human technological infrastructure. They detected nothing. Or rather, they detected everything, and could make sense of nothing. Each time the ship's sensors probed a research station, the technological infrastructure would subtly shift. Quantum signatures danced and transformed. Communication channels became impossible to track. It was as if human technology existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously present and absent. Carlos Rodriguez, working from his lab in Sao Paulo, had developed a communication protocol that was less a method of transmission and more a living ecosystem of information. Traditional communication relied on fixed channels, predictable routing. Rodriguez's system was organic, adaptive. Information moved like water, finding paths of least resistance, constantly reconfiguring itself. The consortium vessel's crew became increasingly frustrated. Their most advanced scanning technologies, systems that had successfully monitored and controlled technological development across hundreds of species, were completely ineffective. Adebayo Okonkwo's encryption teams in Lagos had developed quantum communication modules that existed in a state of perpetual transformation. Traditional decryption relied on finding consistent patterns. These new systems had no consistent patterns. They were living mathematical constructs that rewrote themselves with each interaction. Hiroko Nakamura's team in Tokyo was simultaneously developing quantum computational models that challenged fundamental understanding of information processing. Where traditional computing was binary, their new systems operated in multiple simultaneous states, their very existence a challenge to established computational theory. 24 hours into its mission, the consortium reconnaissance ship began to experience systemic failures. Sensor arrays would suddenly report impossible data. Communication systems would momentarily phase into quantum states that defied traditional understanding. The ship's advanced AI began to report anomalies that human researchers would have described as cognitive dissonance. Thompson understood the profound implications. This wasn't just about technological superiority. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligence could interact with technology. The consortium believed they could control technological development through rigid, hierarchical systems of monitoring and restriction. Humanity was demonstrating that true innovation was organic, adaptive, fundamentally unpredictable. As the reconnaissance ship began its retreat, Thompson knew they had won something far more significant than a technological battle. They had demonstrated a new approach to technological evolution, one that the consortium could never truly understand or control. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity for unexpected adaptation. Now, they were about to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. The quantum communication network spread like a living neural system across the galaxy's forgotten margins. Dr. Jack Thompson watched the initial transmissions with a mixture of scientific fascination and profound hope. What had begun as a human technological breakthrough was transforming into something far more significant, a liberation technology that would challenge the consortium's millennia-long system of control. Deep in the outer sectors of consortium-controlled space, thousands of marginalized species received their first uncensored communication in generations. The transmission was elegant in its complexity, a mathematical language that transcended traditional communication barriers, carrying not just information, but the very concept of possibility. Rebecca Martinez had designed the communication protocol as more than a simple messaging system. It was a technological key capable of bypassing the most sophisticated communication firewalls ever developed. Each transmission carried embedded quantum encryption that could simultaneously exist in multiple states, making traditional interception impossible. The first response came from the mining colonies of the Orcs cluster, a species that had been economically enslaved by the consortium for over 3 centuries. Their transmission was raw, unfiltered, a cry of hope that had been suppressed for generations. "We hear you." The message read, "We are not alone." Carlos Rodriguez's communication infrastructure transformed the initial human research network into a true galactic communication platform. Where the consortium's systems were rigid and hierarchical, this new network was fluid, adaptive, almost organic in its ability to route and reshape information. On a dozen different worlds, resistance movements that had existed only in whispers suddenly found themselves connected. The quantum communication network didn't just transmit information, it transmitted possibility. Adebayo Okonkwo's encryption teams had built something revolutionary. Traditional communication relied on fixed channels that could be monitored, controlled, shut down. Their new system was fundamentally different, a living network that could instantaneously reconfigure itself, that had no central point of failure. Hiroko Nakamura tracked the network's expansion with scientific precision. What they had created was less a communication system and more a distributed intelligence. Each node could process, adapt, and respond with a speed and complexity that challenged fundamental understanding of information transfer. The consortium's communication monitoring systems began to experience catastrophic failures. Their most advanced tracking technologies simply could not comprehend the new communication protocols. It was as if an entirely new form of information exchange had emerged, one that existed between the established technological paradigms. Michael Wong understood the profound implications. This wasn't just about technological innovation. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent species could connect, share information, communicate. The first coordinated response came from the mining colonies of the Orcs cluster. Their quantum transmission contained not just a message of support, but detailed schematics of the consortium's economic control mechanisms. Generations of suppressed technological and economic data began to flow freely. On the desert world of Krell-9, a species that had been reduced to corporate labor found themselves suddenly connected to a network of potential allies. Their first transmission was a detailed expose of the economic systems that had kept them enslaved for generations. Thompson watched the network's expansion with a sense of profound responsibility. They had created something that went far beyond a technological breakthrough. This was a true liberation technology, a method of communication that could fundamentally reshape galactic power structures. The consortium's response was predictably aggressive. Communication jamming technologies were deployed. Entire communication sectors were locked down. Economic sanctions were prepared against any species caught participating in the new network. They might as well have been trying to stop a hurricane with a screen door. Each attempt to restrict the network only made it stronger. The communication system learned, adapted, found new pathways. Where traditional networks had fixed routes, this new system was fluid, dynamic, capable of instantaneously reconfiguring itself in response to any attempt at restriction. By the end of the first lunar cycle, the quantum communication network had connected resistance movements on over 50 different worlds. Species that had been isolated, controlled, and suppressed for generations suddenly found themselves part of something larger. The consortium had believed they could control technological development through restriction and monitoring. Humanity was about to show them how completely wrong they were. A new era of galactic communication had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The consortium's Grand Assembly convened in an emergency session that had never been called in their millennia-long history. The Central Chamber, a massive spherical construct that floated in the neutral space between major galactic sectors, hummed with a tension that bordered on existential panic. Representative Kolax of the Quantum Governance Council spoke first, his translucent exoskeleton shifting with agitation. "Humanity represents more than a technological threat," he pronounced, his communication tendrils weaving complex patterns of diplomatic distress. "They are a fundamental challenge to our entire systemic understanding of galactic civilization." The assembly chamber displayed holographic representations of human technological spread. What had begun as a contained research effort now looked like a cascading wave of innovation that defied every established control mechanism. Traditional monitoring systems had become worse than useless. They were now active vectors of human technological infiltration. Dr. Jack Thompson watched the assembly's preparations through a quantum communication network that penetrated their most secure communication barriers. Michael Wong had developed a system of information extraction that was less about traditional espionage and more about quantum entanglement. They could simultaneously observe and influence the consortium's most protected communication channels. The fleet assembled was unlike anything in galactic history. Thousands of vessels representing technological refinement accumulated over millennia. Each ship was a marvel of engineering, designed to suppress and control technological development across hundreds of species. Quantum dampening fields, computational interference generators, communication isolation technologies that could shut down entire planetary networks in milliseconds. They were preparing for what they considered the ultimate suppression mission. Rebecca Martinez coordinated the human response from a distributed network of research stations that existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. Traditional military strategy relied on fixed positions, predictable movements. Their approach was fundamentally different. A living, adaptive defense network that could reconfigure itself faster than any tracking system could comprehend. The first wave of consortium vessels moved with practiced precision. Navigation systems calculated with quantum-level accuracy. Communication protocols were encrypted across multiple dimensional frequencies. They represented the pinnacle of controlled technological development. Carlos Rodriguez had been preparing for this moment. The quantum communication network was more than a transmission system. It was a comprehensive adaptive intelligence that could transform entire technological ecosystems in real time. Adebayo Okonkwo's encryption teams had developed communication protocols that existed in a state of perpetual transformation. Traditional military communication relied on consistent channels, predictable routing. These new systems had no consistent patterns. They were living mathematical constructs that rewrote themselves with each interaction. The battle began not with weapons, but with information. Consortium vessels found their most advanced tracking systems overwhelmed by a communication network that defied traditional understanding. Sensor arrays would suddenly report impossible data. Computational systems would phase into quantum states that made traditional strategic analysis impossible. Hiroko Nakamura's computational teams had transformed the entire human technological infrastructure into a distributed intelligence. Where traditional military systems were hierarchical and predictable, this new approach was organic, adaptive, capable of learning and responding faster than any centralized command could comprehend. Each consortium vessel represented thousands of years of technological refinement. They had suppressed technological development across hundreds of species. They had maintained galactic order through careful, calculated technological control. They had no idea how completely they would fail. The human response was not a traditional military engagement. It was a comprehensive reimagining of technological interaction. Communication channels became weapons. Computational systems became defensive networks. The very concept of military engagement was transformed. Thompson understood the profound implications. This wasn't just about technological superiority. This was a fundamental challenge to how intelligent species understood technological development, communication, and collective intelligence. As the first wave of consortium vessels began to experience systemic failures, it became clear that something extraordinary was happening. This was more than a battle. This was the moment when humanity would demonstrate that true innovation was not about control, but about adaptive, collective intelligence. The galaxy was about to change forever. The battle unfolded in ways no military strategist could have predicted. Dr. Jack Thompson watched from a distributed command center that existed simultaneously across multiple quantum states, his team transforming technological engagement into something beyond traditional warfare. Dr. Rebecca Martinez's quantum network revealed its true complexity. What the consortium saw as a communication system was actually a living, evolving intelligence. Each human vessel became more than a ship. It became a node in a vast, thinking network that could adapt faster than any centralized command could comprehend. Michael Wong had designed the quantum interface as a revolutionary concept. Traditional ship-to-ship combat relied on fixed strategies, predictable movement patterns. Their new system transformed each vessel into a dynamic computational node that could simultaneously process, decide, and execute across multiple potential tactical scenarios. The first hour of engagement defied every established military doctrine in galactic history. Consortium vessels found themselves confronted by a combat strategy that wasn't a strategy at all, but a living, breathing, adaptive intelligence. Communication channels became weapons. Computational systems transformed into defensive networks. The very concept of military engagement was rewritten in real time. Carlos Rodriguez's communication protocols turned the entire human fleet into a collective intelligence. Each ship was no longer an individual entity, but a neuron in a massive galaxy-spanning brain. Tactical decisions emerged not from centralized command, but from the instantaneous collective processing of thousands of computational nodes. Consortium fleet commanders watched in mounting horror as their most advanced tracking systems became worse than useless. Ships would simultaneously exist in multiple tactical positions. Weapon systems would activate before the decision to fire had been made. Communication channels would twist and reconfigure faster than any computational system could track. Adebayo Okonkwo's encryption teams had created something beyond a communication system. Their quantum network was a living mathematical construct that could predict, adapt, and respond across multiple potential future scenarios simultaneously. Hiroko Nakamura's computational models transformed tactical engagement into a quantum probability dance. Traditional military strategy assumed linear progression, actions followed by predictable reactions. Their new approach existed in a state of perpetual quantum uncertainty, where every potential tactical scenario was simultaneously explored and executed. The consortium fleet found itself fighting an enemy that didn't just think differently, but fundamentally understood reality in a way that challenged everything they knew about intelligence, communication, and conflict. Weapon systems became irrelevant. Traditional computational tracking became obsolete. The human fleet wasn't just fighting. They were demonstrating the entirely new form of collective intelligence. Each consortium vessel represented thousands of years of technological refinement. They had suppressed technological development across hundreds of species. They had maintained galactic order through careful, calculated technological control. They had no concept of how completely they would be transformed. Thompson understood the profound implications. This wasn't just about technological superiority. This was a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent species could think, communicate, and exist collectively. The quantum network turned the entire human fleet into a single living intelligence. Ships would move in patterns that defied traditional understanding of physics. Weapon systems would activate across multiple potential future scenarios simultaneously. Communication channels would twist and reconfigure faster than any tracking system could comprehend. Consortium fleet commanders found themselves confronting an enemy that didn't just challenge their technological superiority, but fundamentally questioned their understanding of intelligence itself. Each tactical engagement became a quantum probability calculation. Ships would simultaneously exist in multiple tactical positions. Weapon systems would activate before the decision to fire had been made. Communication channels would transform faster than computational systems could track. The battle was no longer about destruction. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to collective intelligence. As the engagement continued, it became clear that humanity was offering the galaxy something far more significant than a military victory. They were presenting a new model of collective existence, a way of thinking and being that transcended traditional understanding of individual and collective intelligence. The consortium fleet began to fragment, not through traditional damage, but through a comprehensive transformation of their fundamental understanding of reality. Humanity had done more than challenge a galactic power structure. They had rewritten the very rules of engagement. The galaxy would never be the same. The aftermath of the conflict defied every established galactic understanding of resolution. Dr. Jack Thompson stood at the center of a transformation that would rewrite the fundamental principles of interstellar civilization. The consortium had not been defeated in the traditional sense. They had been comprehensively transformed. Rebecca Martinez tracked the cascading changes through the quantum communication network. What had begun as a human technological breakthrough had become a galaxy-wide evolutionary event. Species that had been suppressed for millennia now found themselves part of a fundamentally new approach to collective existence. It was never about conquest, Thompson explained during the first interspecies conference that followed the conflict. It was about demonstrating a different way of thinking, of existing. Michael Wong's quantum communication protocols had done more than transmit information. They had created a living network of collective intelligence that spanned entire star systems. Each species could now participate in a form of communication that transcended traditional linguistic and technological barriers. The old galactic order had been built on hierarchical control. Technological development was carefully managed. Species were categorized, confined, their potential ruthlessly limited by those who came before them. Humanity had demonstrated that true progress came from adaptability, from the capacity to reimagine fundamental systems of interaction. Carlos Rodriguez had been instrumental in developing the new collaborative framework. The communication network was no longer a tool of control, but a living ecosystem of shared knowledge. Scientific breakthroughs could now emerge from unexpected combinations, from the collective intelligence of multiple species working in true collaboration. Adebayo Okonkwo's encryption teams had transformed the very concept of information security. Instead of protecting information, the new system ensured that knowledge could flow freely, adapting to the needs of each participant. Technological and scientific advances would no longer be hoarded, but shared in real time across entire star systems. Hiroko Nakamura's computational models revealed the true depth of the transformation. The quantum network was more than a communication system. It was a collective intelligence that could process, adapt, and evolve faster than any traditional computational system. The first interspecies research initiatives began to emerge. Species that had been isolated for generations now found themselves working together, their unique perspectives creating technological and scientific breakthroughs that would have been impossible under the old system. Thompson understood that they had done something far more profound than win a conflict. They had presented a new model of collective existence. The consortium's former territories began to reorganize, not through conquest, but through a fundamentally new approach to collaboration. Each species was now a potential contributor to a larger, more dynamic intelligence network. Economic systems that had relied on suppression and control began to transform. The quantum communication network made traditional methods of economic manipulation impossible. Value was now determined by contribution, by the capacity to innovate and collaborate. Scientific research became a truly collaborative process. A breakthrough discovered on one world could be instantaneously understood and built upon by researchers across multiple star systems. The barriers between species began to dissolve, replaced by a more fluid, adaptive approach to knowledge and development. "We're not conquering," Thompson would often explain. "We're inviting the galaxy to imagine something different." The transformation was not without challenges. Centuries of suppression and isolation could not be overcome instantly, but the quantum communication network provided a framework for understanding, for gradual, meaningful change. Species that had been enemies for generations found themselves discovering shared challenges, shared opportunities. The old model of conflict was replaced by a more nuanced approach to coexistence. As the first decade of the new galactic order unfolded, it became clear that humanity had offered something far more significant than technological superiority. They had presented a new way of understanding collective intelligence, of existing as part of a larger, more dynamic system. The galaxy would never return to its previous state of hierarchical control and suppressed potential. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had invited it to evolve.